Mac, you're very welcome to ScaleX Insider Podcast. Delighted and thrilled to have you on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, look, likewise, I'm excited to have you here. We met in Croatia a number of months back at a business conference that was a week long. I listened to a lot of speakers that week, and without rubbing sugar around your mouth, yours was the best presentation that I had listened to, the best talk that I'd listened to. I said, I need to get this guy on the show. So listeners, you're in for a treat today.
Thank you for the overly kind words. There are a lot of smart, impressive people there, and I always enjoy those. So yeah, I really appreciate you saying that.
Oh, you're very welcome. Well deserved. You know, our vision is to inspire, connect, and enable millions of ambitious leaders of small to medium-sized enterprises to scale with purpose. So, Mac, I open up the show to all of our guests with this question: what does scaling with purpose mean to you?
I love your vision, and I think the way I think about scaling with purpose is that, and the way I look at life is not a zero-sum game. You know, someone doesn't have to win and someone lose. I believe that when you're creating a business, everybody can win. You know, your employees, your co-founders, your customers, your investors, all the constituencies around you, that the tide rises all boats. And so I look at my own businesses over history and even what I'm doing now as an effort to really, do some good in the world and hope that what we're doing affects a lot of people in a positive way. So that's kind of how I think about, scale with purpose.
Yeah, I love that, especially coming from someone who has played professional soccer at a competitive level for the best part of his career, where there could only be one winner and unfortunately a loser. That's a really lovely way to couch scaling with purpose. You wrote in your wonderful ebook, and we will put a link in the show notes to that, Creating the Exit Opportunity. If you are thinking of becoming an entrepreneur or are ready to hit the next level, you can do it. I had no pedigree when I started, no Ivy League degree or work experience, no family, money, or powerful network. I had drive, belief in myself, and a commitment to winning. And although I picked up some bruises along the way, it has been an amazing ride, and it's one that I want for you. Can you just share with our audience who are not aware of your journey, the abridged version of how you've arrived to this point?
Well, like a lot of entrepreneurs, I believe it was probably my, in my DNA or part of my destiny to, become an entrepreneur. A big part of my life was football, soccer. As a child, everything I did and thought about and dreamed of, all my goals and dreams in life were soccer related. And so I was pretty heads down for most of my life. Even through university, I never took a business class. I never took a class on entrepreneurship. I never took anything related to business. I looked at university as an opportunity to play soccer and to kind of continue my career. And so when I stopped playing, it was really an abrupt, okay, now what am I going to do with my life? And I had this really kind of fortunate circumstance. So I of course met someone on the soccer field that happened to be looking for an employee for their company, which was a really early stage startup. And in my mind, I had no skills. And so we said, you work hard, just come in, add value. So long story short, I joined this really small early stage startup, and I fell in love with it almost immediately because every day was something different. Some days it was cold calls. The next day it was learning to write code. The day after that, it was taking trash out and packaging up software to ship to, another place. And so I love the energy that came with that.
Yeah.
But the other thing that happened to me that first week, which was kind of a pivotal moment, I guess, is the president of this really small company walked in and said, everybody, come to my office. We're going to have a strategy meeting. And so I'm excited. I'm like, all right, great. First big strategy meeting, plotting world domination. and as I'm literally standing up and I'm grabbing my notebook, he holds his hand up and says, Mac, you stay here and answer the phone. And very fairly, I'm the youngest, newest. I've been there a week. I don't even know what I'm doing. But it hit me so hard that he's like, he doesn't want my ideas. He doesn't care what I think. He doesn't know what I can contribute. And literally in that moment, my very first week technically working somewhere, I decided I have to do this myself. Like I cannot be, relegated to answer the phones. And so I
What
think
age were you?
I was I was a couple years out of college, so probably early 20s,
Early 20s.
probably 23 maybe. Um, and I decided really in that moment I was going to start my own company. I met an engineer in that business, convinced him to leave with me. We resigned and I launched my first internet company. This of course dates me, but the timing is relevant. I launched my first internet company in the first quarter of 1995, literally right after Netscape launched the commercial web browser. So we saw the internet as this kind of catalytic moment. And I convinced this really smart engineer to leave with me and start our first company.
Brilliant
So
timing, by the way, because I
yeah.
had my first lead role in industry in the early 2000s when it was just about to crash. So your timing was impeccable.
I've had good timing and bad timing, but certainly I feel very fortunate that we saw that. We believed in what the internet was going to do, and I spent the first year or two of that business literally getting told by very smart, successful people, you have no idea. No one's ever going to put a credit card on the internet. You guys are crazy. Why would anybody ever, this is a fad, everything you could possibly hear that was a negative from really smart people. And ultimately that business, we we grew from a one bedroom apartment that I was living in at the time. Within 3 years, we sold it for 8 figures, kind of life changing opportunity. And so it was really a validation of a lot of things to me personally. One of which is if you work really hard and you create true value, there is a lot of opportunities. There are a lot of opportunities that come on the backside of that. We chose to sell our business in that case, which was an eye opener for me. That wasn't even on my mind when we started the company. And it was such a, again, life changing to be in your mid 20s and have an 8-figure exit, and every financial goal and dream that my small mind at the time was like, I want this car and this house. I basically was able to check it off, and so it was kind of an interesting early start to life.
I want to come to something there. You railed against all of the advice that was given to you from senior people, senior business people, people who had been there and done it. And as someone who had likely taken advice and mentorship and coaching from others throughout your entire professional soccer career, what was it that galvanized you to actually just continue on this journey and rail against all of the advice that was being bestowed upon you at that stage?
I think everyone has this view of hindsight, and you kind of think of things fondly. And so I don't want to take too much credit. I mean, I wasn't brilliant. I was a dumb kid probably in a lot of ways. I think there were a couple things that were going on. One, I absolutely was convicted. I believed in the idea of us building a company. I had a lot of faith in my, co-founder and our early employees. I've always, from that moment up until, today, have thought I need to hire and work with and surround myself with people that are smarter than me. And so it was definitely a people bet. I thought the people around me were going to be successful. And then I had this just really unshakable conviction in what I thought was the kind of the macro trend. I just couldn't in my mind see any other outcome than the internet was going to change everything. I really believed it. And I didn't know that we were going to personally, benefit from that conviction or thesis. But I felt very strongly when I would go into meetings with even Fortune 500 companies. I mean, I found myself within a year or two sitting in boardrooms with, very, very successful people. And I was basically pounding on the table and saying, this is going to change everything. The way people search, buy, think, it's going to be affected by the internet, and you need to be early. You need to be on this trend. And so I was very convicted. And it's one of the things that over my career, I look at that sort of conviction meter, if you will, and say, that's how I know I should lean into something really hard with my own capital, my own resources, my own time. Or if I'm not feeling that, I know I'm not going to be effective. Like, I'm a conviction person. If I believe in it, I'm all in. If I don't believe in it, I shouldn't even be thinking about it. So, long-winded way of saying I was very convicted, and I don't think anybody could have shaken me of that view.
And again, I'm curious to go a little bit deeper on that. Was that conviction, and it doesn't sound like bravado, and I've met you and you're a really humble guy. It doesn't sound like bravado, but it sounds more to me like strong intuition. And I think it was Napoleon Hill that wrote, what you can conceive and believe you will achieve, and that belief being so critically important. Can you share something practical with our listeners in terms of their ability to tune in to conviction versus kind of egoic bravado?
I think you just hit the nail on the head. I actually was a psychology major, which I never pursued psychology in any form or fashion. But I remembered one of the things we talked about in university was a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I just remember, and I don't remember the context. I just remember this concept, and it's exactly what you just said, which is, if you have unshakable conviction, I believe, just like Napoleon Hill, I think, writes more elegantly, the world conspires to support you. I was able to hire people that were really smart and talented engineers, designers, salespeople, whatever we were looking for, that my enthusiasm and conviction was contagious to them. Like, they believe because I believed, and I felt very strongly. And it wasn't, and a lot of times my conviction was distributed across other people, meaning I was confident in myself, but I also didn't really think of myself as having a lot of particular skills. I still say that to people today. I think there's a few things I do reasonably well, but I'm really good at hiring smart people. Like, I want to be around really smart people. So I don't necessarily look in the mirror and say I'm one of them, but I am for sure going to build my teams with them. And so in a lot of cases, in that case, for sure, I looked at my partner, who was an engineer, and said, he can figure out how to build anything we need, anything our customers can conceive of. He's going to be able to build it. And my design team, they're world class. If they need something designed, we're going to be the best option for them. And so a lot of it to me was, if I felt that way and I was betting on my team, it was just going to kind of create this virtuous cycle of, people were going to feel it, people were going to want to work with us, more people were going to want to, join us. And I think that's really, what happened is, we became kind of the go-to resource because we were really early. While everyone else was hedging their bets, maybe this internet thing is real. There were plenty of advertising agencies, for example, that had lots of talent, but they weren't really sure they wanted to go all in. We were all in. And so if you believed in the internet thesis and you thought your organization should be on the internet, we were on the very short list of people you were talking to.
You have described beautifully in your own language the first three principles of our 10 principle ScaleX framework. So the very first principle is psyche, and I believe it's an impact multiplier for all of the other 9 principles. So having that absolute belief and conviction in the second principle, which is a strong purpose and a clear vision of the future, and having the ability to go out and the confidence to go out and sell that to people, which is the third principle. So you're inspiring other great people to follow in the pursuit of this vision. You have scaled and exited, not only, started, scaled, and sold up six businesses. You've described the first. I'm keen, and we've touched on the kind of three principles. I'm keen, before we get into a little masterclass on your absolute forte, which is exiting businesses. What are some of the other principles do you believe that have undergirded your scaling success?
Well, I do believe, very strongly that people is kind of where the difference is. So surrounding myself with smart people has been a core principle, and because I've been involved in a lot of early stage high growth companies, many of them were sort of resource constrained, and so it's easy to say, hey, I want to hire brilliant engineers. Let me go to Stanford or MIT or wherever and hire. Well, I never had the capital to do that, right? So we couldn't go hire engineers from Google. So the other way I've thought about it and been very, it's worked very well for me, is thinking more holistically about where do I get people, where do I get advice. And so for me, that's meant things like mentors, creating a board of advisors where the advisors, some of my companies, I had an advisor that was an expert in basically every single thing that I believe was a critical success factor for our company. If we thought we needed to be good at something, I'm going to have an advisor who's world class, and they have to be aligned with me, right? And so I don't have to hire that person. I don't have to pay them to be on my payroll or sit in my office, but I can go find a person that's already been where I'm trying to go and help me make the right decisions. And so a lot of what I think I've done well is people oriented, and it's just surrounding myself in that way. And it's just, again and again, I've been in positions where I didn't know the answer, but I had someone that I could lean on that had already been through it. And that's where I feel like I am in life, because I've been through all of these companies and journeys. I've had 6 exits. That's the highlight reel. The reality is I've made a million mistakes, right? I've done everything wrong. So now when I look back, if I'm advising someone, I'm like, oh, I've been there. I've been in your shoes. I know exactly what happened. Don't do this, do that instead. So I really grabbed a hold of that early in my career and said, I don't want to learn everything the hard way. I'm going to find smart people that can guide me. And so that's probably been an overarching guiding principle in terms of the way I built my companies.
And just before we get into kind of your exit methodology, just poking at that a little bit, and I'm going to reference a couple of our previous guests, Professor Srikumar Rao, who wrote a wonderful book, Are You Ready to Succeed? And it's couched on the belief that the universe is a benevolent universe, and it conspires to, it's working for us, not to us, which is something you referenced earlier. The other guest who talked about the wonderful Kingsley Aikens, man in his 60s now, so much wisdom and experience. He talks about sending the lift back down for others, and he's so generous with the experience and knowledge and wisdom that he shared. Practically, when you were going to hunting out these advisors, they're busy people. They're busy because they're great at what they do. Why did they entertain you when you were going with empty pockets and an idea? What was it that encouraged them to actually give you time?
I think it is something that is actionable for everyone. And again, I'm maybe blessed that it kind of made sense to me really early on, but I always looked at it and said, everybody wants or needs something, right? And so there are these people that have made their money in life, or they're really busy running companies, or whatever the case may be, but there's something that is valuable to them. That something could be giving back. They're philanthropic. That's for sure a class of people, which I love. And in that case, maybe I appealed to, I need your advice and help and wisdom, and I don't have anything I can pay you, but it would be incredibly valuable for you to give back to us. And you tell me how we can make this worth your time and energy. In other cases, we would find that they were trying to learn something new. The internet and some of the early things I did, a lot of smart people were interested in learning. And I said, well, if you sit on our advisory board, we're going to expose you to the cutting edge, right? Everything that's going on. If that's important to you, we'll make it actionable for you. And so I always looked at what's in it for them and how can I make it a no-brainer for them to say yes, because of course I'm going to get what I need and want out of this relationship, but I want them to benefit too. And so every single advisor, and I would always do one-off simple agreements, usually 1 and 2 page agreements. What are my expectations of you and your time? And here's what I would like to offer and provide you. Sometimes it was equity. Sometimes it was, their kids played soccer and I would say, hey, that's something I can help you with. What can I do to help you? And so whatever it was, looking for the mutual benefit was what typically made it work out really well.
Yeah, which aligns to, your beautiful description of scaling with purpose at the outset, that this can be a win-win for everyone. You, as I mentioned at the outset, delivered a wonderful masterclass on. I've taken loads of notes actually from the time that you presented in Croatia, building for exit while creating scale and personal freedom, which I feel that's the holy grail that we're all trying to reach. And if my notes are accurate, you stepped out for. Within your exiting framework or methodology, you laid out 4 steps. Could we step our listeners through the steps for a successful exit? So, I mean, the bulk of our listeners, they've already started up. They're in the process of scaling up. But what I took from your exit methodology is, regardless of whether you're planning to exit or not, this is simply good practice.
I 100% agree. And I think I have conversations many days of my life where, our actual program and methodology is called Exit DNA. And so a lot of people will say, oh, well, I have to want to exit, or I need to be ready to exit. And I say, no, absolutely not. I believe that using the exit framework, if you will, is truly a better way to build a company. It gives you the option to exit, which I think is incredibly valuable and important, but it doesn't mean you have to exit. And so, yeah, an overarching theme of ours is, that using this kind of framework will help you build a better business. And it happens to be, as you mentioned, even in the title of that talk, I know that there is an incredibly high correlation between businesses that are designed for maximum value exits and the personal freedom of the key kind of leadership, whether that's a founder or a key entrepreneur, because, at the highest level, no one wants to buy a business that the founder is involved in the critical path of everything. If the founder has to be on the sales call and writing the content and helping with the code and responding to things, that is not a desirable business to buy. So the more a founder can remove themselves from the day-to-day critical path and create systems and methodologies, they are creating personal freedom for themselves, but they're also creating a business that is more valuable to acquirers in the future. And so I know that some of these valuable kind of holy grail components, as you mentioned them, are actually highly correlated. So you can pick one and really optimize for it, and the others are strategic byproducts of that. And so, and I've lived it myself. I'm a case study in it, and I'm happy to go, deep into especially the personal freedom one, because it's something I care deeply about. But yeah, at the highest level, these things are highly correlated.
Yeah, look, we're going to pick up on that personal freedom one. As you mentioned that, I'm smiling because I think it was Michael Gerber who said in his wonderful book, The E-Myth, if you have a business that's wholly dependent on you, you don't have a business, you have a job, and it's the worst job in the world because you're working for a lunatic.
So true. I've forgotten that quote, but that's exactly right.
So let's if you want to tease out the personal freedom element now, we can do that. Otherwise, let's amplify that throughout the framework. So I'm going to hand across to you. Let's step through the framework, if you would, Mac.
Sure. No, absolutely. Well, I think there are, and this is not, from a presentation that I'm walking through. It's really at the highest level. There are four critical shifts that I believe every business owner can make and really needs to make so that they are optimizing their business to have the option to exit. And they're all, interrelated. But first and foremost, one of the things that I am probably most known for is that I believe you should never sell a business based on a financial multiple. I believe when you sell your business, it should be based on strategic value. And if you were to go out to the market today as an entrepreneur and say, I'd like to sell my business, or I'd like for someone to tell me what it's worth, almost immediately we're going to start hearing EBITDA multiples, revenue multiples, all of these things that are very, very financially oriented. And I know for a fact that the reality is the best exits are when someone is looking at the strategic value you've created. So as an entrepreneur, we have to begin to look at our own business and say, okay, hopefully we are generating lots of revenue and we have, profits and EBITDA, but there's something in our business that is driving the EBITDA. The reason we're profitable and growing is because we're doing something really well. Whatever that thing or series of things is, that's where we actually have to focus, because that means we have a product that's differentiated in the marketplace that is our customers love. We have maybe we have a unique process that we're using to deliver our products and services. Maybe we have a incredibly unique customer base that we have a really good relationship with. Something in our business that's really allowing us to grow and scale and create profits. Instead of focusing on the profits, we need to kind of turn our attention back and go, what are those things, number one, and who in the world values those things? So if we have this incredible customer base that we've created, or we have this really unique process through which we deliver our products and services, that is strategic value. And instead of saying, 5 times EBITDA, now we're saying we have a proprietary methodology that allows us to deliver our products and services to the world in a way that no one else can do. That's a more powerful way to view your business.
Yeah, I was speaking with a CEO recently who is in this process, and the conversation centered on the industry multiple. What is typical for a company of his size in his industry, and it focused almost entirely on the multiple, as opposed to a conversation around the value that he might bring or offer to the acquirer. And just for the benefit of our listeners, they're leaders of small and medium-sized enterprises. When we're referencing EBITDA here, it's an accounting term, earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. But essentially, we're talking about the profitability of the company. When we talk about multiples, typically, when a company is being acquired, the normal language is an acquisition price at a multiple of that profitability, which is what we're talking about, 5 times, 6 times, and industries will have certain multiples. Regions might have certain multiples. All of these things. So just to clarify that. So let's get into that. The strategic value. What do you mean by that? Specifically, I know you mentioned the type of customers that you have, potentially the industry that you're operating within, which the acquirer is not in yet and sees you as a conduit into that. So part of that is almost us standing back from the business and unlearning what we've already learned about the business in many respects to look at it through a different set of eyes. But how do we practically do that and map that, create value around that, and map that to what a potential acquirer might want and value?
Mm-hmm. No, it's a great, well, one, thank you for the clarifications. I can be very quick to sort of throw out these industry jargons, even though I'm very dismissive of them, EBITDA multiples and things. But you're exactly right. So what happens is we have to, as entrepreneurs and business owners, we basically have to kind of pull up and above our business and look at them. And the simplest way to do it, in my opinion, is to try to look at your business through the lens of a prospective buyer and just start asking yourself the question, what would a prospective buyer think about this decision? What would a prospective buyer think about the product we offer, the service we deliver, how we do it, what my team looks like? And by sort of building that mental muscle, and I call it the exit lens in a lot of cases, that lens through which you look at your company, hopefully you'll start to say, okay, well, even though we like that internally, I bet a prospective buyer wouldn't see it the same way. They would call that a commodity, or they would say that's not a process. So it starts to identify areas that we as business owners need to kind of dig into and say, well, if a prospective buyer wouldn't value that, we're probably not doing it well enough, right? We're not thinking about it in the right way. And so in many cases, when someone joins my Exit DNA program, that's one of the first things we have to kind of help them do is kind of open up the aperture of how they look at their business. And I will often say, they'll say, well, it's a commodity, we own a cleaning company. Yeah, we're doing 10 million in revenue and we're very profitable, but it's just a cleaning company. And I said, well, why do you think your customers choose you? Well, and then they start rattling off things. Well, we're the best at this, and we have this proprietary, methodology we use. And like, okay, that's strategic value. Like, it has nothing to do with $10 million. People are choosing you because you've done something better, done something different. Now we need to put some more around that. Maybe that methodology needs some intellectual property. So it's patented or trademarked or copyrighted, or there's a trade secret. So now we can say we have a patented methodology through which we deliver. That's a very different thing than saying we're a cleaning company that's doing 10 million in revenue. And so you're right. It's basically a different way to look at your business, and constantly asking, how would a prospective buyer likely look at it, is one of the quickest ways to kind of switch that in your mind.
I interviewed Charles Kahn on the show, the wonderful Charles Kahn, who is the chair of Patagonia, released his second book recently, and he cites kind of 6 characteristics of successful scaling leaders. And one of those characteristics is the scaling leader has dragonfly eyes, and he uses the metaphor of a dragonfly, because a dragonfly can see things through 30,000 different perspectives. So I think what we want here is dragonfly eyes whenever we're viewing our own business. Is that fair to say?
That's exactly right, and I love that analogy. And it's so really in my mind, there are kind of these 4 shifts. That's really shift number 1, but all of the others are in many ways byproducts of that. It's deciding that you're going to look at your business and think about and talk about your business based on strategic value, not any of the financial multiples. It doesn't mean that those things don't matter. Of course, if you're profitable and growing, that's incredibly powerful. But imagine now everything that we're talking about is stacked on top of that very simple revenue and profit number.
And so again, if my notes serve me well, it leads beautifully into the importance of us becoming the storyteller and crafting that irresistible exit story. Am I correct?
That's exactly right. Right from the playbook. So kind of shift number 2 is creating what I always refer to as the irresistible exit story. And why that is so important is because in the universe of prospective buyers of your business, their natural tendencies are always going to go very quickly to financials, bullet points, due diligence, and those things are very boring, matter of fact, numbers, details. When the reality is the buyers, prospective buyers, they're humans, and humans react to emotion. And there's no more powerful way to create emotion than storytelling. And so when you describe your business, if you say we're a $10 million cleaning company that's now profitable working in Northern Canada, those are all facts and bullet points. That's great. But the reality is that same company could say, our organization has created a proprietary methodology. We're the industry leading cleaner, growing faster than anyone in North America, simply because we have this methodology and a world-class team that's allowed us to do something no one has ever done before. There's not a person that hears that story that doesn't immediately go, and I just made that one up. That's not a great one, but that was just off the top of my mind. There's not a person that hears that doesn't immediately say, I at least want to learn more. Like, tell me more. How do you do that? What do you mean by proprietary? How are you the fastest growing? Otherwise, you're a $10 million cleaning company. And they're looking at lots of companies. Maybe there's a $20 million and suddenly you're not even on the list anymore. But with the irresistible exit story, you're basically taking what you do incredibly well, which is your strategic value, and you're starting to create alignment for different organizations and why they should care. Why should they be the ones to buy you? Why should they be the ones that get your strategic value, because they want to make sure their competitors don't? So the more irresistible the story becomes, not only do you create a lot more interest in people wanting to buy your company, but you can start watching that sort of exit value just tick up and tick up and tick up, because their eyes have moved away from the financials into all of these really valuable things that you've created as a business.
That requires those who are planning to sell the business, in my eyes anyway, to be forensic with understanding what it is that their buyers might want, back to Dragonfly Eyes again, and having that understanding of your business through the buyer's lens. Practically, and allied to that, then the ability to craft a wonderful story matching your strategic value with their needs, wants, and desires. Practically, and you probably get into this in your program, Mac, what should our listeners do to begin that process? Do they download annual reports? Do they go on to the quarterly statements from the companies? If these companies aren't listed, how do they get into networking forums? Do they speak to their neighbors? What is it? Probably a combination of all of those things, but.
Yeah, so that actually, it's kind of a perfect transition into what I think of as really this third critical shift, that you have to make, and that's to find the best buyers. And my view is you have to have prospective buyers in ideally 3 to 5 different industries. So one of the things that happens that is the path of least resistance for a business owner is when they decide to sell their business, or if they talk to an M&A advisor about representing them to sell their business, there are 2 types of buyers that almost immediately hit the list. One is a financial buyer, private equity firm, et cetera. The other is their own industry. So if you're a $20 million supplement brand, then the most likely group of buyers that people start talking to are $50 million, $100 million supplement brands. Maybe they get creative and say health and wellness companies, but it's basically your own industry. And my philosophy is we have to, again, open up the aperture and say, okay, that's one of hopefully 5 different industries of people that should want to buy my company. So it is a brain exercise. We have in our program, and I'm happy to share this. It might even be linked through the ebook, but I have this real simple framework that I call the solid gold buyer sheet. And it's an exercise to help people start thinking creatively about different industries and starting to form a thesis on why they should be interested in buying your business. You don't know yet, right? You have no idea if they're truly interested. You're starting to form ideas and a thesis around why should someone in a brick and mortar doctor's office ever want to buy a supplement brand, right? Very different industries, but I'm starting to form kind of a theory and thesis. And what happens to make it really actionable, what I always recommend, I think it's literally 15 minutes a day, and I always say it'll change your life, is if you have a couple of companies that you've listed on this sheet that you think, you don't know yet, might be interested in buying your business, and you have your early theories, create a Google alert for their company. Google.com/alerts, put in Acme Corp, and for 15 minutes a day in the morning, just read any news or press releases or earnings releases that they put out. Because what happens is over time, all you're looking for is the one hook. And CEOs and board members telegraph their strategy. That's what they do. They tell you, we're trying to move from a product company to a service company. We're hoping to expand from North America to Europe. And all you need as a founder is to hear one thing that you go, that's how we help them. They just said they wanted to be in Ireland. I'm in Ireland. Now I have a reason that they want to buy my company. And so it's a really simple, actionable way. But what the other like byproduct is, just by doing that 15-minute a day exercise, your brain muscle gets so good at just imagining if you're talking to that CEO, you've heard them now put out earnings releases once a month, once a quarter. You know how they think, you know what they care about. You can start to imagine yourself making a pitch to that person that you've never met on why your company is such an obvious acquisition for them, because you know exactly what they're trying to do. So over time, I called it the solid gold buyer sheet because I always say it bubbles up little pieces of gold. Over time, you just see, here's 5 different industries and 10 companies that I think should want to buy my business. And that's back to my conviction. If I feel that way, it's going to be really easy for me to sell my company because I know a bunch of people that want to buy it and why they care and what they're trying to do. And so it's a muscle that we can build as entrepreneurs.
There's something, you're going to have to edit this out, Rob. Something's caught in my throat. Oh my goodness.
You okay?
I think I'm okay. Oh my goodness. In my notes, and I recall you saying this, and I'm not sure if I have the sequence right, but you mentioned the 8 a.m. test, that every company should be able to pass the 8 a.m. test. Can you share with our listeners what the 8 a.m. test is, Mac?
Yeah, I use this a lot in our program because I think it generally tends to illustrate for people a challenge. And it's basically when I'm doing talks and I'm doing things, I will set up this scenario where you're in your office on a Thursday afternoon and you're kind of thinking about an easy Friday. You're thinking about the weekend ahead. So you're kind of easing into the weekend. You don't have much planned. And you get a phone call kind of out of the blue. And the call is from your largest competitor, kind of an industry icon. And on the phone, he immediately goes in and says, Mac, I'm going to cut to the chase. I want to buy your business. I want to pay you in cash. We'll close quickly. We'll pay above industry multiples. He says everything that's like amazing and right. And you're caught off guard. And of course, you're trying to be cool and collected and say, oh, that's amazing. Thank you for thinking of me. I'm flattered, all those kind of things. And you say, I'd love to learn more. How about we talk week after next? And he says, well, Mac, that's the thing. My CFO and I are in your town and we have to start due diligence tomorrow at 8 a.m. or this is a no-go. And the minute you hear that, if that scenario happened, there's really 2 outcomes that I would say 99% of business owners would have. You would either say, wow, gosh, you're catching me off guard, but that sounds great. Thank you so much. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 8. And you hang up the phone and you call everyone on your team and say, get in the office, we're pulling an all-nighter because things are laying in files and your financials are not updated. You're just not prepared. And you'll do everything in your power to be ready by 8 a.m., but still knowing you're going to fall short. Or sadly, a lot of people will in their gut know there's no way. Like your office, everything is unorganized, you're not ready. And you would say, gosh, thank you so much, but I have a busy day tomorrow. As much as it pains me, we couldn't do it tomorrow, even if I wanted to. And you literally let an opportunity of your lifetime kind of fade because you're not ready. So one of the core tenets, and it's really the fourth kind of actionable thing, is I am a big believer that you have to be proactive and prepared and create this option well in advance, because for any reason, if and when you need or want to sell your business, you need to be ready, because you never know where those opportunities are going to come from, whether they come unsolicited out of the blue, like the 8 a.m. test, or if you decide, we'd like to sell our business by the end of the year. Even if you said that and we're sitting in August of this year, it's not enough time, because so many you can still sell it, but there's no way you can maximize value, because so many of the things that we teach and that I think are important are these little things, 15 minutes a day, 30 minutes on a weekend, but you need time for them to compound into value. So the earlier you start, the more those things can compound, so that if that 8 a.m. scenario happened, what I really want for people that I work with is to say, you answer, great, I can't wait to see you tomorrow morning, hanging up the phone, literally smiling, thinking how blown away they're going to be when they see that your deal room is already set up in a Dropbox folder. It's all organized. It's all ready. Not because you knew they were coming in. That's just how you run your business. We reverse engineer it, right? And so I'm a big, big believer in being prepared, and having that option leads to so many good things. And I'll tell you one other 30-second story. I spent about 6 years on a public company board, multi-billion-dollar public company that was doing acquisitions. So we were buying companies, 50, 100 million, $200 million acquisitions. And one of the things that I always like to do is I would show up to prospective, companies that we were thinking about buying. I would show up an hour early and try to just walk through the office, kind of navigate my way around, go past the reception, go back and talk to sales, talk to marketing. And of course, the expectation is if you talk to 5 people, you're going to get 5 different answers in terms of, what do you guys do here? Why are you successful? Like, companies are not prepared for these things. If you are, it blows people away. The expectation is you're not ready, you're not organized. That's why the person calls for the 8 a.m. test, right? They want to catch you off guard. They want to see where the skeleton's buried. If you have just done the blocking and tackling to be ready, you're already positioning yourself for great outcomes. So yeah, it's kind of a core tenet, which is that fourth thing, which is be proactive, because I believe the more proactive you are and the more time you give it, the more it creates value.
I love this. I really love this. I love the clarity of it and the stepped approach. A couple of things you mentioned in there, again, getting super practical. The time frame, look, 12 months isn't enough. Let's plan for this early. I want to pick that up in a moment. And another term you used was deal room. So if you share with our listeners what the deal room is, because that, for some listeners, they may feel that that's the preserve of big companies, when the reality is we're talking about, a nice folder with legal documents in there, with your MS Office licenses up to date, all of this good stuff. So can you just speak to both of those in terms of the time frame for exit and the deal room in practical kind of SME land?
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that about the deal room, because you're exactly right. The perception is deal rooms are for these massive transactions and big law firms. And the reality is, what we do practically and specifically is, I have a due diligence request form from one of the top M&A attorneys in the United States, probably in the world. And what we do with our members is we say, you take this due diligence request list, and the due diligence request list is specifically what someone is going to send you when you say, I would like to sell you my company. They will say, great. And they'll send you a long list of things that you need to respond to: financials, legal documents, HR, tech specs, all those things. So all we say is take this due diligence request list, use the categories to design your Dropbox folder or Google Drive or whatever you use. It doesn't even matter. Use that as the categories and start today moving your files and folders into that format, because that is exactly how people are going to request your information. And so rather than waiting until it's time to pull everything together and scramble, we start immediately, and every week. That is, and it's easy to say on a Sunday, I'm going to set aside 30 minutes every Sunday just to go through and make sure if I've signed a new employee, their employment agreements are in that file. That if we've done a new distribution deal, I've saved it in the folder. If I've upgraded my technology, the licenses are there. And so again, the execution is really simple. Maybe takes you an hour or two to design the folders based on this very common framework, and takes you 30 minutes a week to make sure that your files are in there. And then the minute someone requests it, you look like the most organized company on earth, because it's even in the format they've requested it. It blows people's minds.
Yeah.
And the other funny practical example I give people is most small business owners created an operating agreement when they started their company at some point, whether it was last month or 10 years ago. And on that due diligence request list, one of the things that's going to be on there is the minutes from your board meeting. And you're going to read that and go, what board meetings? And then your attorney is going to say, oh, in your operating agreement, you're supposed to have had quarterly board meetings for the last 5 years. And of course, they're willing at their hourly rate to recreate board minutes that they can put in that folder for you to respond to the due diligence request list. And that's what most companies do, versus just know that as part of due diligence, you're going to need to have either the operating agreement not say that, or you're going to need to have those files. And so again, it's easy to just put in a calendar once a quarter. We're going to have one single sheet of paper to say, we discussed our company strategy, myself, my co-founder, my VP of sales, and that one document will probably save you $5,000 in legal fees versus scrambling to do it at the end, right? And so practical, easy, but you have to start early, and it compounds into value.
Yeah, it's such great advice. And on a practical note, I love that idea. One pager, quarterly board meetings, and as you've recommended, to document the what you have discussed. From a governance perspective, it's just good practice to get together with your other board members anyway, at least on a quarterly basis. We were meeting on a monthly basis when we reached a certain size, and we hired in a professional minute taker who was wonderful. We didn't have to worry about this at all. A great lady, and all of the minutes were taken very professionally. And in recent times, actually, I'm non-exec of another business, and we record our board meetings. Again, we have quarterly board meetings, and they're recorded. There's a professional chair there, and again, they're all taken care of. There's a couple of things I want to pick up on before we move into the close. We mentioned at the outset some of the things that make businesses unattractive to a potential acquirer, and one is kind of founder dependency, where the business is so strongly dependent on the founder. If you really want a clean exit, it's unlikely you're going to get that. It's back to the kind of a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year earnout until you fulfill all of the promises that you're suggesting will be fulfilled in terms of the value that this business is going to create to the acquirer. The other you mentioned is inadequate processes and systems. What are the other things that our listeners need to be mindful of that make themselves unattractive to a potential acquirer? And flipping that on the other side, essentially is just good practice in terms of running a really healthy, profitable, attractive business?
Yeah, I think there are a number of things. We have this, entire session we tend to do on mitigating risk, and basically what we're doing is looking at the common issues that tend to come up in due diligence that throw up little yellow flags and say, hey, rather than them come up later in due diligence, can we proactively mitigate them? And so some of the ones that you just mentioned, of course, are important. Documentation around processes and systems is a big one, because if you're a small business, you probably have key people who know how things work, whether that's the founder or key employees or key contributors. But that doesn't mean that they're well documented so that a third party could look and say, I can read a document or see a flow chart that shows me how things work, because Mac could get hit by a milk truck and all of a sudden he's the only one that knows how that happens. And so documentation around systems and processes is really good practice. It helps you onboard new employees. There's lots of strategic benefits that far exceed exit, but it is for sure one of the issues that will make someone not attractive because you look like a small business. The same number of employees where the founder's not involved in a critical process, where things are well documented, where there are protocols and systems, feels like a much bigger, much more professional organization simply because of those things. And so we often think about reverse engineering. Imagine selling your business, imagine going through due diligence, imagine responding to these questions, and it helps you identify, if I was looking at my own business critically now, where would I realistically see some things that are flags? And I always look at it like, the more flags that get thrown up, the less likely a deal is to happen. And so one of your simple objectives is proactively remove flags. If you send financials to a third party that is looking at your business and you haven't updated your financials, or you don't have 2 or 3 year pro formas, it's not a reason not to buy your company. It's just a little flag. But if 10 little flags get thrown up, the value of your business and the likelihood of it getting acquired is going down. And so a lot of it to me is just using that lens to look at your business in the current state to say, where do we have issues or problems that we should try to mitigate? But you touched on some of the big ones for sure.
Yeah, again, you've touched on the fifth principle of our ScaleX 10 principle framework, process and systems. And in the interest of adding value to our listeners, I would encourage you to listen back. I believe it was season 1 when I interviewed David Jennings, and we explored his wonderful work and his book, Systemology. Actually, one of our own team members is a certified systemologist, because we've seen so much benefit in offering this service to people. So if you listen back to David Jennings, and also I would encourage you to listen to Paul Akers, who is a lean guru. He talks all things process, and just a wonderfully knowledgeable guy. I'm keen, before we move into our close, Mac, you now mentor, and we spoke, at the outset, the importance of mentorship and having board advisors. As a mentor to entrepreneurs and business leaders, what is the most common piece of advice that you find yourself giving?
Most common piece of advice. That's a great question. I mean, I do try to, mentor, advise, and work with founders in lots of different industries. And so, I think where people tend to make common mistakes, one, the critical dependency on the founder is, I think, negative in every single way, shape, and form. We talked about it in terms of exit value. Obviously, it's negative in terms of personal freedom, because you don't have it if you're working all the time. But the other thing is, a business can't scale. I mean, Mac doesn't scale. Mac's ideas might scale as long as I have people. And so I think it's a common thing, because I will say that and people will push back and say, I don't have the money or the resources, we can't hire. And I'll say, contractors, advisors, mentors, joint ventures, strategic partners, there's 100 ways to solve the problem. But where entrepreneurs have a natural tendency is to think, I'm the only one that can do this, or I'm the only one that will do it this way. And I'm happy to tell you my personal story of how I learned this. But I know that is a flaw. That is a fundamental flaw in the entrepreneurship brain, because even if someone doesn't do it as well, the only way they're going to learn is by doing it. And so if you hang on to it, it can never scale. And I know you preach this. It's your methodology. It's what you do. I've lived it. The only way to scale a business, to create an exit, to create personal freedom, all the things that I care about, is I have to look for ways that I do 2 or 3 things that I'm hopefully uniquely good at and gifted at, and I want to do. And everything else that leads to good things in my life have to be with other people. And it doesn't have to be full-time employees. It has to be other people. And so I have to solve the problem. So I feel like I'm saying that repeatedly to entrepreneurs and kind of, drilling that into the entrepreneurial brain. That's probably the biggest one.
Yeah. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, to go together is really the message there. And what I always say to entrepreneurs, leaders of businesses who have the aspiration to scale, is look at the bottle. The bottleneck is always at the top of the bottle. I can't pass now. We're moving into our close, but I can't pass without you sharing your, rather than people will have heard that before and think, that's cliched. But you teased me with sharing your story, how you've become convinced of this. So can you take a couple of minutes to share that with our listeners, Mike?
I'd love to, yeah, because it's very personal and important. So if I rewind back early in my career, I mentioned, I sold my first company in 1998. So a couple of years after founding my first business, I sold it, had a wonderful exit. The company that we sold to went public. I resigned the day after the IPO to start my next business. That next business, I grew incredibly fast, built it, sold it for 8 figures before I turned 30. So July of 2000, I sold my second company. I'm not quite 30. I am in so many ways feeling on top of the world. I feel like I've done it more than once. It couldn't have been luck because I did it again. But something really big is about to happen in my life. In August of 2000, I'm about to have my first daughter. And I felt very strongly, because of the way I grew up, that I wanted to be the type of dad who was there for everything. I imagined being a dad that was home for dinner every night and coaching the soccer team and being at the play at 2:00 on a Tuesday and carving the pumpkins, all the things. Because my own father, who was a wonderful father, was a third shift engineer, worked incredibly hard to provide for my family. And there were just times that he was working, right? He could not be at a soccer match or at a thing in the middle of the day. And most dads weren't. And I wanted to be that dad. So long story short, the real problem was, up until that point, until July of 2000, although I had been successful, I had also worked 7 days a week, and I had slept on the floor in my office, and my wife would call me and say, come home, and hang up the phone, because the only thing I knew how to do was work hard. And so I made this commitment to my unborn daughter in July of 2000. I said, I don't know how I'm going to do it, because I don't even know how to do it any other way, but I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there for everything. And as now, the benefit of hindsight, the way I tell the story is, that little girl I dropped off for her freshman year at NYU 19 years later. And over those 19 years, I built and sold 4 more companies, and I never missed a freaking thing. I was home for dinner every night at 5. I carved every pumpkin. I did everything. Now, I made a bunch of mistakes. I'm not saying I was the perfect dad, but what happened, and I get chills even telling the story now. It's been, she's 23 years old. But what's really cool and what really is interesting about it is I legitimately had no idea how this was going to work. But starting basically right after she was born, even before she was old enough to know that I was home for dinner, I started. I would stand up at 4:45 in my office in the middle of a presentation. I could be literally at the whiteboard or holding the mic. I would set the mic down and walk out of the office. And I think the first probably week or two, people thought I was joking or crazy. Like literally, I stopped talking, I set the mic down, I walk out of the room. But what was really cool is very quickly, everything started to change. People knew at 4:45, Mac is going to leave our office. The meeting still needs to happen. There still is a sales call. There's still product that's got to go out. So they, as a team, would start to say, okay, Mac's going to leave. So when Mac leaves, I'll handle the presentation. You do this. Can you write the code? And I watched the level of contribution and talent and everything in my team just go through the roof, to the point very quickly, even back in those early days, I would start to go, I think they're better at it than me. Like, why do I even need to be in the meeting? I should be on this, doing this other thing because they're doing a better job. So incredibly long story short, I lived my life that way. I pulled my kids out of school. I traveled the world while I was running companies because I knew that I had a role in the company that was very specific, and everything else had to happen with or without me in the office, with or without me on the phone. And that freedom allowed me to live, I think, a pretty amazing life that I care a lot about, especially now that my girls are grown. But I also think that's specifically why I built businesses that scaled and people wanted to buy, because everyone knew that like Mac could be living in Barcelona and the business is scaling and growing.
Mac, that resonates so strongly. That is so inspiring. I'm delighted that we took a few minutes for you to share that story. We always say that we want those who apply the principles of our 10 principle Scale X framework to arrive at, start at the base camp of Scale Everest and arrive at the summit of Scale Everest, having felt challenged but accomplished, feeling that they've grown personally and that their team have grown with them, as opposed to arriving up there cold, bedraggled, lost half the team on the way up and wondering what the hell they're doing there. So this can be done, folks. This is the first time we've had someone on the podcast, and we're more than 100 episodes in, who has scaled and exited 6 businesses. And you're an incredibly young man, Mac. You just exude energy and wisdom. You're an exemplar of someone who has been there and done it and scaled with purpose. Can you share with our audience 3 timeless takeaways?
Timeless takeaways. I think, circling back on a few of these things that we've talked about, one is, I think it is all about the people you surround yourself with. And so thinking creatively about how you surround yourself with amazing people should be the priority of just about every business owner. So one is absolutely that. I would say the other one that we didn't touch on that I feel relatively strongly about is the vision you have. Kind of goes back to that conviction. You need to be thinking big things, big potential, what's possible. Don't constrain yourself to your current realities or the current state or the current world we live in. Let your brain go to what is possible. And when you build conviction around what's possible, as we discussed, I believe to my core, you can watch it start to happen. So dream big, think big. And then, last but not least, I think this core principle of mine, which is, design your business to create the option to exit, because what you want is the option. You can choose never to sell it. You can choose to sell part of it. You can do a joint venture. But once you've designed your business so that once someone wants to buy it and is willing to pay you maximum value, all the things that you care about, you've just built an incredibly good business. So designing it to create the option to exit, I think, helps us in every way.
So profound. Mac, I have thoroughly enjoyed the last hour and 15 minutes. Has absolutely flown. You've given a real masterclass in scaling and exiting. I've enjoyed your humility, your wisdom, your energy. This is an episode that I feel many will replay over and over again. What's next for you? Is business, well, business number 7, exit DNA? Are you going to exit DNA? What is next for you?
So I have, yeah, it's kind of two things in my life outside of my family, which remains a big priority, time with them and travel. Exit DNA, which is something I'm, yeah, not designing to sell. It's just a framework for me to mentor and help and give back. And I get a lot of, energy from that. And then the other is I actually bought a professional soccer team in southern Spain, which I'm incredibly passionate about. And my wife and I will live in Spain this fall, and I'll be at probably every home match. And so it's kind of an intersection of personal passion, lots of potential. It's a 114-year-old club, so with this amazing history and this beautiful place in southern Spain on the coast that I'm really passionate about. So those are the things that I'm kind of putting energy into.
Well, brilliant. And I'm looking forward to connecting with you out in Spain come the fall. But if anyone else wants to connect with you, reach you, Mac, where best to connect?
So I have two very basic websites, maclackey.com, which is kind of just a personal site. And then I do have a site, exitdna.com, where it talks a little bit more specifically about this program and some of the resources we offer. So certainly on those websites or on social media at Mac Lackey, pretty much everywhere. And I'd love to help anyone I can. And I really appreciate you having me on this wonderful show today.
Oh, it's been an absolute privilege and honor. We're going to put links to your wonderful ebook in the show notes and to any of the other resources that you've mentioned, the solid gold buyer sheet as well, and indeed to your websites and your programs. So, Mac, thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you very much.